Hi guys, it's me, Jen Blanchard, botanist, and your host of Botanica Broadcast. And today I have my first podcast guest, a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, Taylor Williams, who is a horticulturist. He's a botanizer and a soon-to-be landscape architect.
That's
but
right.
Taylor's been working in landscapes in New Orleans and Baton Rouge for how many years?
A little over 15 years.
15 years. So, and we met, what, like 10 years or more ago?
It's been a little minute.
It's been a minute, like 2015 probably. 2014 or 2015.
Sounds about right.
And the way we met was we were both at a spring garden show at City Park in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the botanical garden. And I was there with my students. At the time I was teaching biology to students from De La Salle High School. And I was the liaison for the ecology club. So I was there with my students. I had them germinate a bunch of seed, and we were selling seedlings to raise money for the club. And then I was also selling my pottery, because one thing you may not know is that I also make pottery.
She does art too.
Yeah, I do art too. But Taylor was there, and he was advertising his landscape company, and he's an artist as well. He does wire sculpture and draws.
A little bit of land art, some other stuff.
Yeah, some land art. So we're kind of like, I think it goes together, right? Like art and science has always gone together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're both into plants. We're both into art. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We're
tell
friends.
me, or tell the audience, whoever that may be, how you started to get into plants. Like, what drew you to this profession, so much so that you would pursue an education in it?
Yeah. So I guess really my interest in plants started when I was a child, and I had a lot of memories of just being in the yard with my parents and my sister, my godmother. I would just spend a lot of time outdoors in my suburban yard, River Ridge, and earlier than that in Metairie. But even when I was like a little boy, I would help plant flowers with my parents. I remember planting tons of annuals and going to the garden centers, and I just was really into it. I enjoyed that time with my family and like sort of connecting with the natural world in a way, or at least with plants and soil, getting my hands dirty. I remember one time I was walking around with pruning shears, like big ones, when I was maybe a toddler, and just like chopping away with them, just walking around. And my mom came around the corner, and my dad, he was into something, some sort of DIY project, carpentry, something, wasn't really watching me. And my mom was just like, "What are you doing? He's gonna kill himself," you know. But like, I always loved to like prune shrubs, and even when I was in the first grade, I asked Santa for cacti and a Venus flytrap.
Okay,
Like,
so you've been a plant nerd since
yeah,
birth.
a little precocious, you know.
A little bit. Okay, so let's bring it kind of forward. You know, when did you decide that you wanted to do this as a profession?
Yeah, it just started to make sense to me when I was starting college. I think back to like when I was 14, 15 years old, that's when I started to really get into like plant names and even more into the nuances of like pruning and other like horticultural best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had bought this book from the American Horticultural Society, proper pruning and training, and I had bonsai books, and so I started kind of getting into that, just like studying those sort of things.
How old were you then?
So that was like when I was like 14, 15 is when I
Okay.
really started to like develop this as a hobby on my own, just like
Mhm.
reading literature and watching, you know, landscape renovation shows on HGTV.
What would, I mean, you know, I'm a botanist, so I study Latin names of plants, but what would make you want to start learning those names? Like, how did that even...
I don't know, I just found that I naturally remembered the names,
Uh-huh.
and then like once I finally Well, when I first started college, I was just going for general studies, and I really wanted to play college basketball. Honestly, I didn't really
He
care
has
about.
the hype for that.
I didn't care
Gotcha.
about like what my major was and stuff. I was just in general studies, and unfortunately, I didn't do so hot when I first started college. I was kind of partying too much and not making the best decisions at the time. But when I eventually did go back to school, I decided I wanted to study horticulture because by that time, in my early 20s, I had gotten into doing bonsai. I started right before I went back to school. I started to volunteer at Longview House and Gardens, and
Okay, and that's on Metairie Road in New Orleans, it's on Bamboo Road, right?
Bamboo. It's like right by the canal that separates Orleans Parish from Jefferson Parish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I don't know if I've told the audience, parishes are like counties in Louisiana, so it's related to the Catholic parish system. And so when we say Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, we're talking about two counties, but Orleans Parish is where New Orleans is, and Jefferson is where Metairie is, and it's on that canal right there. And Longview House and Gardens, you work there?
I would volunteer every once in a
Okay.
while, and especially in the wild garden where all the native plants are. And there's a guy by the name of Tyrone Foreman who
I know
really,
Tyrone.
yeah, he's if you know him,
We know Tyrone.
he's memorable. Yeah, he's a character, but he's
hilarious.
He's a wealth of information. I heard all about his ex-wives and all his other.
Don't tell all that to the
all his other little jokes that he would always tell. People would be like,
Oh,
wait,
yeah.
did you ever actually get married, Tyrone? but he was a great guy. And then of course Amy Graham,
He
the head
still
gardener.
volunteers. Tyrone, you might catch him at City Park because he still works out there planting and doing things. We actually
Yeah.
bumped into each other not too long ago. I went out to City Park and he was in like a wetland area, and so we were talking about two plants that you know well, crinum and hymenocallis, and like how to tell those two apart. And then we started talking about irises and how to tell the irises apart because there's like, what is it, six? Is it 5 or 6 native Louisiana and hexagona?
Yeah, there's hexagona, there's gigantic cerulean,
Yeah.
nelsonii.
So he was telling me the difference to be able to tell the difference between nelsonii and fulva.
Yeah, those two are kind of close.
Yeah, so because they're both kind of red in color.
Kind of
So
coppery.
he was telling me about some of the morphology and how to tell those two apart. But
He understands a lot of those subtle details, and I got a chance to spend time with him in that garden, and also I traveled with him to some other gardens. Like I went with this other guy, Jim Campbell, who actually was a former president of the American Camellia Society, because of course that wild garden, it also has camellias.
yeah,
And so I went with Jim, and we went to his property in Covington where he had all these just massive camellias and native plants. He had huge tie trees along the river there and all sorts of cool stuff. And also we went to this azalea breeder, Dr. John Thornton's place, where he had all these native azaleas that were like hybrids that he like bred for different colors, and I mean everything: red, orange, yellow, pink, white, like every native azalea color you could imagine. Just like 12-foot by 12-foot shrubs in his yard, just full bloom.
and those native azaleas, like the ones that I've seen out doing field work, because I'm mostly a field botanist. I've seen like generally next to a creek, maybe on a sandy bank. So
These are just like out in like an open field where he just had all these seedlings that he had grown into these massive shrubs, and they were in absolute peak bloom because Jim knew exactly when to go, and it was incredible. Like I've never experienced anything like that aside from with him and Tyrone that time.
So do you feel like, sometimes I feel this way, and I'm just curious if you feel the same, that like we get on this kind of plant journey and it's like very serendipitous. Like you just happen to meet somebody who knows somebody who takes you somewhere, and you meet somebody else, and it's like you start to connect with all these plant people.
Yes.
And then as you're connecting, you're learning so much about how they breed these plants and how they grow them, all the little tips and tricks that they use. So I mean, have you felt like that your journey has kind of been like the universe? Do you feel anything kind of spiritual about it, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like when you're passionate about things and you focus on them and you're putting out good energy, then things are gonna like come back, and it's almost exponential in a way. It's like,
Right.
you know, you just keep building on that, and these connections happen, these moments of synchronicity happen. And it's like one time when I was in Miss Margie's nursery, Marge Jenkins, who's you know, one of the pioneers of growing native plants
Louisiana
in
Native
Louisiana.
Plant Society,
Yeah, and just in
yeah.
the South, like, you know, one of the legends of plant propagation, and the Azalea Queen, all the other nicknames that she had. When I was in her nursery one day, I don't know, maybe at this time I was just kind of like, well, am I doing the right thing? Whatever. I came across a plant that she was growing called Taylor's Perfection.
I love Taylor's Perfection. That's a camellia, right?
It's a camellia. Not only is it a camellia, one of the plants that I grew up with in my yard.
I love Taylor's Perfection, but I don't think Taylor is perfect.
Yeah, I'm not like Dr. Allen, you know, I don't make that joke. But,
Yeah.
you know, so not only is it called Taylor's Perfection, but as I was in the nursery, I was like looking it up on my phone, and I realized the botanical name is Camellia X Williamsii. So
That's kind of coincidental.
so it's a hybrid
Yeah.
that happens to carry like my last name.
Yeah.
And so it's just like one of those moments of like reassurance. And I feel like that happens all the time to me. I feel like more so than a lot of people. Maybe it's because I'm more just sort of calibrated to like recognize those things, or open to like connecting things. And I think that's a big part of like plant people in general, or people who can identify plants, is like pattern recognition. And that's
Right.
like, that's what makes a good botanist, or someone who can really retain, you know, plant names. You have to be able to just have that gestalt, like know it when you see it. You know, like Dr. Allen says. And that's another person who I've learned from, and who
When did you
Tyrone
meet
actually introduced
Tyrone?
me to, because he was like, oh, you have to get all these books from Dr. Charles Allen. He's the best. You know, he's
my mentor as well. So
yeah. And so
when did you meet Dr. Allen?
So I guess maybe close to around the time I met you is when I first met
really?
Dr. Allen. Maybe a year or so before that, I had gotten all his books because Tyrone was like, you need to buy these. And so when he came and spoke at the spring garden show, maybe the year before I met you or something like that, I purchased all his books that he had at the table, basically, at least like 4 or 5, however many it was, and got him to sign all of them. And I remember his wife was like, wow, you really like these books.
Yeah.
But I was like,
Miss Susan.
yeah. I was really excited to not only get them, but have him sign all of them. So yeah, like edible plants, Louisiana, trees, shrubs.
It's edible plants of the Gulf South.
Oh, that's right.
Trees, shrubs, and woody vines of Louisiana.
Mhm.
The award-winning grasses of Louisiana.
Got that one.
Louisiana wildflowers.
Got that one.
And then he also did a book on butterfly and moth gardening. So native plants, you know.
And I think he's published something about the Cajun Prairie too, with Dr. Vidrine.
Dr. Vidrine wrote the book on the Cajun Prairie, but Dr. Allen and Dr. Vidrine mapped all of the remnant prairies in Louisiana, Cajun Prairie, together. And that was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many years ago now that they did that. And then they, you know, from that, they did several presentations at meetings across, you know, the prairie region from the north to, you know, the west. And they presented papers on a lot of different topics related to the Cajun Prairie and its restoration. And then they started working, you know, with the others in the Cajun Prairie Habitat Preservation and Restoration Society. And so they helped to restore prairie.
Right. Without their discovery and their efforts to, you know, engage other people in these restoration, you know, efforts, initiatives. Yeah, that would be the word. Yeah, we wouldn't have a lot of those genetics and the, you know, abundance that we do at this point. And they, I mean, still, like, compared to what it was, it's not a lot, but they have made a ton of effort, and it's incredible that they were able to preserve some of these plants for, for future generations and for all sorts of different applications.
Well, and now they're famous movie stars because there's a movie called Louisiana Grassroots, and it's all about their efforts. And do you know Larry Elaine?
Yeah, I'm familiar with him too.
Yeah, so he's in that, and then Steve Nevitt, who's doing a lot of Cajun Prairie Seed. But Steve kind of is I see him as like the person who's coming behind Mark Pasterek's.
Yeah, and he's got a nursery now.
So, yeah.
And he's doing some things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I've definitely learned some things. Reading stuff from Dr. Allen, talking to him. Also got a chance to go stay at his bed and breakfast and hang out with him and Susan for the weekend. And
Miss Susan makes the best authentic homemade Chinese food ever. The best. Like, she should have had a restaurant, but she's like, I don't want to do all that work, Jennifer. And I'm like, but you do. You cook for every time Dr. Allen has some type of
you know what?
class,
I just
she
had
does all
Chinese
the
for
cooking.
dinner tonight, so it's all coming full circle.
Oh yeah,
It's
right.
that synchronicity that I was
that
talking
Chinese you had is nothing like Miss Susan's Chinese food. Okay.
But no. So yeah. Just like doing a botanical workshop with him. Also, John Mannion, who was the curator of the Call Wildflower Garden in Birmingham at the Botanical Gardens there. And he used to host the Native Plant Conference.
That's Birmingham Botanical Garden, or it's
Yes.
not Bellingrath. That's a different. Okay.
Birmingham Botanical Gardens. Bellingrath is in Mobile.
Right, it's in South Alabama.
Which I've been to as well, and I enjoy.
I haven't
both
been
the
to
gardens.
either of those. I feel like I have so much to do.
You'd like to call Wildflower Garden.
Yeah.
It's really cool because
I love all botanical gardens.
they have this really neat like creek that goes along the hillside that some New York landscape designer came down and like took all this local quarried stone and made this like natural water feature and all these beautiful native plantings. And John, not only would he curate that garden, but he would host a lot of trips and go do botanizing in South Florida or upstate New York. And so I've been to like the Adirondacks with him and met some other people in the sort of green industry, whether they were working at public gardens or botanists or landscapers. And I'm really grateful meeting him because he introduced me to so many cool landscapes across North America, and also just some really close friends now, like Matthew Ross over at Longwood Gardens at the time. Now he's actually the director of the historic, the Botanic Gardens at Historic Barnes Park in Traverse City, Michigan. So he's on to bigger roles now. He used to be the education director at Longwood Gardens, and they do some really cool like native plant preservation work with all the orchids across North America and some other stuff. So it's just like you said, just these connections just happen when you start to meet people in the green industry.
Yeah. So tell me, of all the botanical gardens that you've been to, which one was your favorite and why?
Ooh.
I know, that's a tough one.
I mean, as far as scale is concerned, I would say Longwood.
Come in closer.
So
it's
just when you see like a 4.5 acre conservatory under glass, and they have like 100 acres of manicured gardens. They have these massive like Las Vegas size Italian fountains.
Wow.
And it's all like modernized now. They just did a huge renovation. It's even more conservatory space. All the fountains were redone for like $100 million a few years ago. They went and quarried marble from Italy, from the same mountain, the same vein the original stone came from. They had a New Orleans native redesign all the like water feature to where it's all like computerized, and they have these basket weave patterns and all this just really over the top grandiose stuff. But
fountains.
It's awesome. Like, I mean, it's like you wouldn't see anything like that aside from Las Vegas or Europe. And that's why that whole garden started, was because Pierre Dupont, like, he went to Europe. I think he went to Versailles and went to some other historic gardens. It was like, oh, I want something that's sort of monumental and palatial back at my estate near Philadelphia.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a really cool garden just because of the scale. But there's other, just in Pennsylvania, there's Chanticleer, there's some other campus arboretums like Swarthmore College, just really high level horticulture and gardens around there.
So like you were volunteering at Longview House and Gardens in New Orleans and met Tyrone and did all this stuff, met all these people, met me in the process. And then when I met you, you had Will Garden, which was your landscape company.
Yes.
And so when did you start that? How was that right around the time I met you, or was it before that?
That was a year or two before I met you,
Okay.
I think. And maybe 2 years before I met you.
And guess what? Spoiler, I used to work with Taylor. He was actually my boss for a hot minute.
For a little bit, yeah.
I don't know though. Oh no.
Yeah.
He was we're not gonna talk about that. No, I'm just kidding. He left me alone with a lot of the crew a lot. And
Yeah,
so
the maintenance accounts.
it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to get a lot of stuff done if you hadn't helped me at that time, because just you being able to communicate with me and some of my clients, that really helped me a lot. And you know, at the time I was trying to kind of scale a little bit and do some more installations and designs, so I couldn't be as hands-on with the maintenance all the time. I was trying to like get other work.
Yeah.
And of course, when I went back to school the past few years for landscape architecture, I kind of like scaled back down and was doing a lot of the work myself again. Yeah. And then like more recently, now I've taken a couple of semesters off or finished my art bachelor's and everything. You know, I've been like doing more.
So we were working together, and then I went to do some other stuff, and you scaled back. And so when did you start at LSU in the landscape?
2019, the year we won the national championship. Go Tigers!
Oh, stop! And then and so you started in 2019, but that's right when COVID hit. So was
right
that
before COVID, and then COVID came. It kind of, I put part of my design education on pause during that whole scenario, because we did a semester of that on Zoom, and I was like, well, I need a break. Just mentally, that time period was really tough between school and some other personal stuff, and
I think it was tough for everybody, so
yeah.
we don't have to get into all the details.
No, but you know,
yeah.
Like truthfully, I think it all worked out, you know, because over time I went back to school, and then I was able to connect with one of my other mentors more recently, Jeff Carbo, through that whole process. Right. And I've learned so much from him.
And so you've been in school for landscape architecture in the School of Art and Design at LSU, and you have been like interning with.
I interned with Jeff the past couple of years. Okay. Also would do some work with my company doing like maintenance in his yard. Mm-hmm. Also, we would do some plantings, helping to complete some of the master plan for his residents, as well as some little projects for some of his clients in the neighborhood and so forth.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about like your landscape aesthetic.
Okay.
And you know, obviously I know that you use a lot of natives in the landscape, so right. Maybe tell us a little bit about like your landscape aesthetic, and because I've seen some of your work by helping with some of these jobs, and I've seen like little micro pocket prairies and things like that you incorporate into driveways and things. Mm-hmm. You know, there's like a loop and you have that little prairie there. So tell us about your landscape aesthetic, and how, like, what plants are your go-to native plants, you know, and maybe give us a little insight on that.
Yeah, well, gosh, where do I start? I think, to me, context is everything, you know, architecturally, culturally, you know, what are the needs of the clients? What ecological function is this landscape going to serve? And so, you know, I'm not a purist when it comes to native plants. Like, I love using native plants, and I want to use the best native plants that I possibly can for the right applications. But I also understand that in certain instances there are limitations for a lot of native plants. Part of it aesthetically would be that there's a lot of deciduous or more kind of seasonal native plants, whereas the historic sort of plant palette here, especially in like New Orleans or South Louisiana, tends to be more evergreens, a lot of Asian evergreens.
People really want something that's green all the time. That's the hard thing with the native plants, right?
Yeah.
Like finding species that are going to be evergreen, which like maybe is yopon. Yopon would be something like that. Dwarf yopon, weeping yopon. What are some other like evergreen natives that you can think of?
Well, this is a regional native, Viburnum ovavatum,
Okay.
Mrs. Schiller's Delight. That's a dwarf one, and there's this is the straight species, as good as like sort of a small tree or like a large shrub that you can kind of shear. Has the spring white blooms. The dwarf one's kind of like a yopon as far as like size wise and growth habit and everything, but you get more of a seasonal look with the spring flowers that are, they're much more conspicuous than the holly flowers on the yopon, because they're really, you can barely even see the flowers when they bloom.
Yopon,
But the viburnum are really showy when they do bloom.
And
it's
they're
like
umbels, like, because I'm thinking of like viburnum dentatum or something, so they're going to be like bigger umbels, because I don't know that
Yeah,
plant.
they're still small. They're small, almost like a spirea flower or something kind of like that, I suppose. But yeah, or like the sweet viburnum
generally,
flower.
are they white? Or,
yeah, they're white.
Okay.
They're white. And there's other evergreens. I mean, palmettos are evergreen.
Yeah.
That's now that's a little bit.
But that starts to take you kind of, even though they're found throughout the swamps, it kind of takes you more into a tropical kind of feel.
Yeah,
when you have
I would say
palmettos.
when you have like, depending on the architecture and stuff, but definitely if it's a more contemporary home and landscape, that's a great plant, because you can have this like tropical modernism aesthetic that you're going for, but also like culturally, like, and everything, it's like that does feel like a swamp plant. It's Louisiana, it's like the dwarf palmettos or the southern bottomland forest, like the understory.
When you see cypress and palmettos, you think Louisiana.
Yeah.
And you think natural landscape.
So like I love, and whenever I can, I love to use those. I think if you look at some of the green infrastructure around New Orleans, Baton Rouge, it's like they plant those, they plant cypress trees, and the perennials or whatever, they plant them like too far apart, or they don't choose the right plants. But
or they plant them too close together.
And the palmettos are like the only thing that lives, because then the maintenance crews come in and they just like weed eat all the mess and weeds down, and then you have palmettos and cypress
trees. They spray
trees.
Herbicide.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get into glyphosapes later, because that's a whole other thing.
No, the glyphosapes.
I'm gonna do a PowerPoint on that at some point. Just let me know if you're trying to book for your local garden club or whatever. I'd love to do a talk on glyphosapes and landscape maintenance.
Oh my gosh.
Because I'm critical of that way that we do overuse herbicides, and you end up with this like crusted, scorched earth landscape.
And the other thing that I find, like with municipal or city urban landscapes, is that they plant these plants that really are difficult to maintain in a median or a neutral ground,
right.
Something like that. And we call, in New Orleans, we have these medians basically that are, usually grass, but we call it a neutral ground because that's where people would go on the neutral ground to hang out or settle disputes, etc.
Right.
But in the median, right? Because meet in the middle, right? So, but I noticed like in Baton Rouge, those landscapes, they put in irrigation, then people hit the median, they tear up the irrigation. The plants aren't very sustainable. I was driving and I was like, they could put, I was driving down North Street here in Baton Rouge where there's all these oak trees and other trees, but there's nothing in the understory. And I was like, it's just mulch and it's just a place for weeds to come in. And the landscaper's probably coming in there, spraying a bunch of herbicide. I don't know, but I was thinking, why not put some calicarpa in there? Calicarpa americana, the American beautyberry. At least you have some things, for the large part of the year that would provide some type of texture and little understory, you know. And I was thinking about maybe some of the yaupons and things like that. But what are some other go-to natives that you would incorporate into, you know, a landscape, an urban landscape? And
I would say one plant I find is really underutilized and has a lot of potential for urban use and green infrastructure and other, you know, just garden settings would be Cephalanthus occidentalis.
oh, buttonbush.
Buttonbush.
You really like buttonbush?
Love buttonbush,
I
not
like it
only
too.
because it has really cool flowers and
Yeah.
the pollinators love it, but you know, you can prune it to kind of control the size of it, make it more of like a smaller, medium-sized shrub. You can let it grow into like a small tree. It also has really high tolerance to alkaline soils,
Okay.
more so than a lot of native plants. Because a lot of those azaleas and other things, like they want more of a low pH, like bog ecosystem,
Acid, yeah.
like, you know, pine savannas, you know, just like, yeah, very acidic soils. And in urban soils with all the concrete and the leaching of, you know, that limestone material and stuff like that, it's pretty alkaline. And in New Orleans especially, it's like it's already, I guess, because of the river depositing a lot of things in, you know, accumulation of different minerals and things, it's naturally a higher pH than say the North Shore or something. And then especially when you're introducing a lot of like concrete rubble into the soil,
Yeah.
all this urban disturbance in the soil profile, like, then yes, like you want stuff that's more tolerant of high pH.
Yeah, and I think on the North Shore, they have, you know, a lower pH because of the pine forest, the like Abita flatwoods and things like that, you know, so there's a lot of pine trees, so you get that.
Well, and like, say where I grew up in River Ridge, you know, kind of west of the city, there was historically like a lot of pine trees, I think, at some time. But, you know, through the past several decades, since I was a kid, so much of that canopy has been lost, or, you know, not just with hurricanes blowing them over, but then people fearing that these tall, you know, loblolly slash pines, whatever, that they're going to fail. And so let's go ahead and cut them down.
Yeah,
and
they're going to fail and land on their house. But the issue is when you cut down these big old trees, you just decrease our hurricane lines of defense, because those trees actually provide some friction with the storm and slow it down. They buffer it. Yeah. So it's like, you know, everybody's cutting down the tree so it doesn't fall on their house. And I'm like, no, please leave the trees.
Well, it's not just the windbreak, you know, sort of aspect of it, but the effect on the local hydrology as well. Because all that transpiration, all the water being pulled, you know, from the soil and evaporating from the canopy, I mean, that is what helps, you know, mitigate some of that, you know, flooding and other stuff. And it's also helping to protect against erosion with all those root zones and things. And it's like, you know, like the neighborhood I grew up in, I remember it was all water oaks and pines and all this other stuff. And now it's like most of that's gone. And yeah, we have some live oaks. Yeah, we have some magnolias and some other stuff that are more desirable kind of like suburban trees. But, you know, it's okay to like replant some faster growing trees and have them around for 50 years or whatever. I mean, we need to have more of a sort of successional approach to managing urban canopies, and like almost have like a master plan for how neighborhoods would deal, I think, with the planting of trees. And like, yeah, leave it up to the citizens, obviously, but have some sort of guidelines and suggestions and more resources for them to kind of collectively plan their own neighborhoods and be able to replenish the canopies, because it's just the cooling effects, you know, the water being pulled that, you know, that would go into the storm drain, like all those things, all that, you know, collectively it makes a big difference to the quality of life, the health, safety, welfare of people. And I think it's just something that's gotten kind of, you know, paved over essentially. I mean, for lack of a better phrase.
You know, there's in urban landscapes, it's just that it's very impermeable. So it's like, how do you in your landscaping, like what do you do as far as design wise to help kind of solve some of these problems?
Yeah, I think it's important to try to avoid introducing a lot of paved surface into any, landscape situation. You can utilize crushed stone or pavers, things like that are pervious. Of course, you have to understand how to maintain those,
yeah.
and it's yes, there may be some more maintenance costs with some of that as far as like managing leaf litter or maybe replenishing the top layer of stone occasionally, but you're also saving money on the front end, so it kind of balances out because it's not nearly as expensive to put in crushed limestone as it would be to pour concrete.
Right.
So it kind of you end up, I think, with a better overall situation if you try to utilize some of those approaches and go for like green mulch and stuff when you're planting. Plant like ground covers very densely,
right.
Or if you want to use smaller plants like shrubs and stuff that are going to establish over time, plant perennials in between them. And like I said, take that sort of successional approach to your landscape to where, okay, maybe I just have a mass of this ground cover around everything, and some of it's going to die off as some of these shrubs mature and start to kind of fill in and touch each other. But you can find things that can occupy some of that ground layer and prevent all these invasive weeds from taking over your yard, and that way you don't have to spend $1,000 on pine straw a year,
right.
Because you have these. And the front end cost might be a little bit more to get some of those additional plants, but there's ways that you can find smaller plants or propagate some things and get them in the ground. I think you just have to be creative about how you're utilizing some of those ground covers and native plants and stuff.
I think the same thing, like when it comes to gardening or landscaping, I'm always telling people plant heavy. Like you want to plant a lot of plants so that way they compete and keep out the weeds. The weeds won't have anywhere to come up,
Right.
But if you have nothing but a few sparsely planted, groupings, and then all the rest is pine straw, you're going to be dealing with weeds all the time.
Yeah, I think weed suppression is one of the key things, especially in this climate. We have so much rainfall, so much heat. There's just an infinite amount of weed pressure, more so than a lot of other regions, frankly. And I think one of the biggest hindrances, I would say, to success of a lot of the green infrastructure projects would be that they're using inappropriate plants at too sparse of a spacing. And so not only are they too far apart to begin with, but they're not filling in because they're declining in health. And then, like I said, then you have a maintenance crew that just comes and the weeds have taken over and the plants are dying, and so they just come and weed eat and mow everything down.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because, it's like I saw recently, I love prairie plants and stuff, but they're trying to put prairie plants by like some of our local parks and in areas where really you should have just utilized some of the local ecology in New Orleans and not be trying to superimpose a Cajun prairie ecosystem into that setting.
Right.
And it's just, it's frustrating because these projects are being touted as these successes, but yeah, sure, it's a great experience for everybody to plant. I think people are learning and they're benefiting from all these.
And they're native plants.
But
they're not really regionally appropriate.
They're not, and they're
location
not.
Appropriate.
I don't think they're gonna perform well
right.
Based on what I've seen. They typically don't, and it's that same this sort of mentality that we're gonna put in all these native plants and we're gonna put down a ton of pine straw and we're gonna have a nice ribbon cutting and a feel good moment and put it on Instagram, but. I sound a little cynical, but I just have seen it too often, and I'm really, at this point, just waiting to get licensed so that I can do something different,
Yeah.
And once I do finish school, that's what I plan to do is come back to New Orleans and, be able to do more
So-
green infrastructure projects and things like that.
We didn't talk about that, but you're leaving LSU.
Mm-hmm.
You've been accepted at Ohio State.
Yeah, so I finished my my art bachelor's after 3 years of landscape architecture at LSU, and I got advanced placement in the master's program for landscape at the Knowlton School at Ohio State. So
Okay.
really excited about starting there. They
Yeah.
have some great faculty.
I'm excited for you. I feel like
Yeah,
it's we've been here for so long, and we have been looking at the same plants over and over and over again. And I feel like it's nice to change your geographic location and see some new plants, maybe some different things, some things that maybe grow in a cooler climate that we can't grow here. So you'll get to play with some things and try some new things out. And,
oh, absolutely.
And being in a different environment at a different university, you're going to make new connections with other people in the industry. And I just think that it's such a great opportunity for you to really kind of, make a name for yourself. I think you will. I know you well enough. I know you're going to be extremely successful.
Thank
no
you.
doubt in my mind.
I appreciate that.
You're very knowledgeable. Sometimes it's like I feel like I'm competing. Who's the better botanist, him or me? And sometimes I would say you know a lot of the landscaping
we have our strengths, and that's another thing with native plants. I think people have gotten so fixated on this idea of native plants and knowing about the native plants, and a lot of the people that are doing the native plant design, they don't have a design background, and they don't have a really strong knowledge of traditional landscaping with exotic plants, which typically are what comprises everything.
Let's talk about that just a little bit about, when it comes to landscape architecture and design, there are reasons for people to have to be, to get a license and go through the education, and that goes back to like the irrigation and the flooding and making sure that you're doing things in a way that you're not creating more problems, so like
I'll say like I was very critical a lot of times of landscape architects. I'm a little bit more empathetic as I've gone to school,
right,
and but then again, like, a lot of people that are driving some of these plant movements, they're doing it and they are accomplishing the goals of creating landscapes that have more infrastructure for insects and wildlife.
Habitat and
yeah, like
pollinators.
there's some success and there's definitely some wins that we should celebrate.
Right.
But I also think there's a lot of room for refinement when it comes to aesthetics and just overall maintenance and other things as it pertains to these more naturalistic landscapes or native in the landscapes. It doesn't have to be completely naturalistic. You can have a formal native garden if you want to. It doesn't have to be only native plants. You can have both native and well-adapted, non-invasive exotics. Yes, those do exist.
Yeah.
And so I get tired of some of the groups and just like these idea, if it's not native, then it's
right.
bad.
I'm pretty, me, I'm very much the native plant, like pushing, plant more natives, plant more natives, plant more natives. But I have a few things that I think, camellias in Louisiana, not native, they're from China, okay? But they are a very kind of cultural plant for us because we have these camellia societies that have existed in this region for a very long time. Yeah. And so I'm okay. If you want to plant some camellias, let's plant some camellias.
Well,
there are certain things that it's like, I'm okay with planting that even though it's not native. Or if you have an existing landscape and you want to redo your landscape, I am not the type of person who's like, let's rip it all out and replace it with native. No, it needs to be in steps where we're expanding the flower beds and we're adding more natives and removing the problematic plants, the invasive plants,
Right.
by replacing them with natives, and then filling in these areas and kind of expanding slowly rather than let's rip it all out. Because when you rip it all out, you're
Well,
gonna
here's the
liberate all
thing.
that soil
Here's
too.
the thing. Okay, you can go rip out all your lawn, and you can pay some landscape company to plant it too far apart, and then come and they sign a 1-2 year maintenance agreement, and they're sending their crew out every other week, and they're weeding your yard, and they're making a lot of money, but it's like you have a lot of pine straw in your yard, and it doesn't look designed.
Yeah. And I hate, oh my gosh, I've seen where they spray the pine straw to give it color. Like, what is that? They're spraying it with paint. What is going on?
I just, I think
Where am
it's
I?
more sensible to me, like if you need to phase the project and slowly acquire more of the sort of square footage that was lawn is now planted beds, but you're doing it like the right way, and you've researched over time, and you've maybe done some smaller sections and like seen what the microclimate is in your specific yard, because
Right.
like,
every yard is different.
every yard is its own little part of the world, right?
Yeah.
You have
Well,
different
and you have
factors.
different influences, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I've been to some of your clients' homes, and like some, you have this very riparian. They're right off of a ravine, so there's a lot of water coming through that landscape when it rains and whatnot, going towards that slope, So there is a science to landscape architecture and being able to design a landscape that is going to flourish or be sustainable,
Right.
So
Well,
I think
you think about landscape ecology, and you have different ecoregions across Louisiana. You have like if you think about like a section of elevation throughout Louisiana, and you have these like upland plants that are higher on the slope, and then you get further down, and like on the actual maybe like mid part of the elevation, you have these plants that are more adapted to this sort of like sloped landscape. And then you have stuff that's in like the bottomlands or the little swamps and stuff that are like depressions, or in the river sort of margins and things like that. I mean, there's so much nuance, and like one plant that could work here in this part of Louisiana would be totally different in North Louisiana,
Right.
or totally different with this soil texture, soil pH. And that's the thing, is like you need to understand agronomy to an extent. You need to understand like all these competing influences and
geology, hydrology.
Yeah, it's like
there's a lot to
there's
it.
not just a one size fits all. Let's just like prairie it up, or let's just put cypress trees and palmettos in every land. Like it's each unique landscape needs its own sort of prescription based on
it's
all
like a
these
prescription.
and like especially since a lot of these soils and landscapes are essentially damaged by urbanization and other things that we've done. So if we're trying to remediate that, or we're trying to create a really healthy garden that captures stormwater or provides a lot of ecological function and is beautiful, then we're needing to analyze all those things and come up with the appropriate plan. Because again, it's not like a cookie cutter, copy and paste, one size fits all. Yes, you can have a style, you can have a language as a designer, but
So I want to hear more about that. I want to hear more about your personal style. Like, what is, we were talking a little bit about your aesthetic. So I want to hear about you as an artist, as a designer, as a landscaper.
Well,
what is your aesthetic or style? How would you describe that?
I'd say it's still developing. I don't know that I have a set style, to be honest. And I think it was very different when I started out, where I think I was more into polycultures as far as like just like randomized planting, and like a lot of feedback I would get from clients initially when I was proposing these landscapes was, I like some of the plants, but it's too busy, and they would always want me to like simplify. And that's one thing that I really benefited from, I think, working with Jeff, is he's one of the best at doing this like massing of plants, and like southern shield fern or palmettos. Or
what's the scientific name of southern shield fern?
Tholipteris kunthii.
Okay.
And so
I love to do that because I know he knows the answer. I'm not trying to stump him or anything. I just know that he's going to tell me. I knew the name. I just wanted
of course, yeah. But yeah, so like he's a master of utilizing some of those native plants in mass and then creating this architectural statement with them. But the other thing I realized, to be a successful landscape architect, you need to understand architecture too. And that's another thing that I'm still developing, is like this sort of repository of like all the nomenclature for different like architectural features and things. Like if okay, this type of molding and this sort of like bump out on the facade, like that's what that's called, right? This is a historical style in New Orleans or in this other part of Louisiana or in Arkansas or wherever, like because it's regional. Like
there's a regional aesthetic for a lot of, or a neighborhood aesthetic, right? And I think like the architecture, it informs the landscape or vice versa sometimes, so that I think, is like when I think about Frank Lloyd Wright, right? Mm-hmm. Is that right?
The Prairie School.
Like I think about his architecture was a lot of times informed by the landscape.
Right.
Not so much the architecture is informing the landscape's informing the architecture. Yeah. So I think, it could go either way.
I think.
And so that's very important to have that knowledge of architecture and be able to look at a building and see, obviously if it's a brutalist building or a modern building, it's going to be, maybe have like very sleek and smooth and square, maybe kind of rectilinear shape to it, and so that might inform how you design these gardens around it, right? And then if you have something more traditional, well then, or even something a little more traditional but like smaller scale, a cottage or something, that's going to inform completely how you design the landscape.
Yeah, I think one good rule I would say to kind of, it's not a rule necessarily, but like it can be a good starting point, I would say, is doing more formal or higher maintenance stuff like closer to the house or the building, and like that's stuff that you're going to be engaging with more regularly. Yeah. You're going to be able to monitor it to maintain it better. If you need to water it more, if you need to do these different things, if you need to trim it more, it's right there by your door, it's right there by your back patio, whatever. Like doing that, and you're that in those areas, you're trying to relate more to the architecture, and you're pulling in maybe hardscape that relates to the architecture, or whatever. Or you have these other architectural features. Maybe it's columns, maybe it's a pergola, or some other like garden feature that extends your outdoor living space. And then the adjacent plantings, those are all, like I said, slightly more manicured, formal, and relating to that more so than as you extend further into the yard, you're probably better off doing stuff that's more low maintenance. Maybe it's a little bit looser, maybe it has more of a naturalistic aesthetic, or less formal sort of approach. And I think when you think about it in those terms, like I said, like functionally, visually, it typically tends to work.
Okay. Well, I think we're getting kind of close to the end. We've got about like 6 minutes. So I want to ask, maybe for like your last kind of thoughts on this, or you said you're going to Ohio and then you think you're going to come back to Louisiana, and that's the plan, but like tell us the future for Taylor.
So I'm continuing to run my landscape company. We're doing several installs right now. I'm training some new people so that I can still operate remotely, taking on more maintenance accounts over in Audubon, Garden District, Old Metairie. Give me a
right.
shout.
Okay. I'll have to put those in the hashtags. All right.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, looking forward to seeing how that all develops with, the landscape contracting, just like mainly residential stuff. I'm also kind of collaborating with some tree companies on some things. I'm hoping eventually, yes, I can come back within a couple years from now. I should graduate my master's program in May of 2027. So
okay.
I can come back and I can, continue to scale my business and actually kind of morph more into a design firm, or at least expand that component of the business and work with some other landscape architects and maybe some people that graduated from the programs that I went to. Maybe they'll be licensed by then, or wanting to shift to a different firm, whatever, take the next step in their career. So I'm hoping I'll be able to, collaborate with some of my peers and maybe have like a wholesale nursery, tissue culture lab, some other things down the road. But yeah, essentially green entrepreneur. That's my MO, I guess.
Yeah. And so, when you finish at Ohio State, you're gonna come back here, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like be open to whatever life brings you. If you make plans, then the universe will change them, right?
Yeah.
So, but I'm excited for you. I think you're going to have a great future. And what is, like, if people want to connect with you on social media, what's your, like, are you on Instagram? I think you're on Instagram, right?
Taylor _5 Williams is my personal account. My business account has just recently switched to TWALA _LLC.
Okay.
And actually I'm rebranding the business name from Will Garden LLC to TWALA Twala LLC, because it's Taylor Williams Art Landscape Associates.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Kind of
So
shifting more into like a
starting
design
to-
firm
Yeah,
slash,
firm.
I want to kind of take the next step, focus on branding and getting the business scaled a little bit more. And I'll still be doing some work in Columbus, but I'll have some people in place for us to continue to do installations
I need to
and maintenance.
hashtag Ohio and Columbus too, I guess.
That's right,
And
yeah.
trying
to do some landscaping over there too.
Yeah,
So holla
of
at your boy.
course. I think it would be holler at your boy. Oh my gosh, so New Orleans. I think that it would be great for you to meet some new people and do some new work and get some different experiences up there, like I said before. And I hope that you have a great time in Ohio. And I hope that you come home at some point to visit, but if life takes you other places, I think,
It don't matter where I go, New Orleans always gonna be home.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's like I gotta come back
504 for life.
for life.
For
And
life.
the thing is, my parents still live in New Orleans.
And your sister.
My sister, when she's not travel nursing, she lives in New Orleans. So I'm always gonna have family and business interests
And
around
friends.
Louisiana. A couple friends here and there, few of the tight knit circle.
But any other last thoughts for the audience? The Botanica Broadcast people, the plant people.
I feel a lot of pressure to say something really profound
No,
or
it doesn't have
succinct
to
right
be.
now.
No, just
But just don't put a lot of pressure on yourself with gardening or landscaping. You're gonna kill plants.
Yeah.
You're not gonna create the perfect thing.
Death is part of it.
Yeah, it's all an experiment. You're gonna learn by doing, and try to take off kind of bite-sized pieces and do as much research as you can. And
Can they ask
have
you
fun.
questions? If they connect with you, can they reach out?
Yeah, you can
Are you
reach
open to
out.
that?
I can answer some questions also if you want to schedule consulting visits, things like that. Then I do that sort of stuff, especially if you're looking to do landscape installations, things of that nature. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that everybody has enjoyed this episode of Botanica Broadcast. It's the maiden voyage, the first one, the first full-length 60-minute interview with a plant person. And, at some point I'll have to get someone to interview me, but I would prefer to have these conversations with other people and
Should be like the Parent Trap, where you just
oh my
two
gosh,
versions of yourself.
like the twins. the
Lindsay
double-
Lohan.
No, I'm not doing that, y'all. It's not gonna happen. But no, I thought, when I was thinking about the podcast and the format and what I wanted to do, I know so many plant people and really interesting people who have a lot of insight and can give people some great advice. And so I thought this would be the best way to do it. So thanks so much for coming and being my first guest. I'm gonna give you a hug. Oh, and because I'm a hugger. And I hope you all enjoyed it. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube to Botanica Broadcast. Follow.
Smash that like button.
Smash the like button. Comment, interact with me, ask questions, whatever you want to do. And then also on Instagram, there's Botanica Broadcast on Instagram. So follow and like on that page. And then if you want me more personally on my botanist side, it's Jen Blanchard Botanist on Instagram. So don't forget, subscribe, like, share, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Jen.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being with me.